Hi guys, this video will cover ACT test number 18 and then the English section. When you look at the question, like for the English section, something that I recommend you to do is please read the entire paragraph as well. Some students, they just look at the question only and then try to figure out what's going on. But then as you read and understand the entire paragraph, that sounds way more like, I guess easier to figure out those answers. Okay, let's do one by one. So the question number one, it says whether or not wanting to work for fairgrounds, you have to be willing to push yourself. Whether or not you have to push yourself, it's not really clear. But then if you think about if you want, that's way more clear, so that you have to think about it. Okay, and then C and D is too wordy. Editors of our triannual literary magazine is weird because the subject is editors. Something of something, you always have to come with first one. So editors, probably the subject, so the plural is not is, it has to be are. And then the next one that, busy all year, and then our year begins in July with fundraising and promotion for the magazine, which presents a mixture of poetry, short story, and essays. Our office fills with subscription forms, noun, and flyers. That must be sort. So that must be sort, handle, and put is actually modifying this forms and flyers. So that is in case of here, that is the what's more call it the relative pronoun. So nothing wrong with this. So it's a. And then in August, we sent letters to our favorite author, inviting them to send manuscripts. Meanwhile, receiving unsolicited submission from other writers. During September and October, we read and evaluate hundreds of manuscripts. So number 4, should writer use to create the clearest, most logical transition to paragraph 4? So then we have to understand what's going on in the beginning of the paragraph 4. It says some offerings are scrolled in pencil and others are expertly typed. Some arrive with the letters. So this describe about hundreds of manuscripts. So which means it makes sense. That's why it is F. Nothing wrong with this one. And then number 5, pencil, others are. So that semicolon, first of all, semicolon means period. So same thing with a period. So you can, before semicolon, you have to have clause, which is subject and verb. You have to have. And after semicolon, also you have to have subject and verb as well. So because of that, the others is the subject and are is the verb. But then between subject and verb, we don't put anything. Because of that, it has to be C. Yeah. Because semicolon itself is fine. And then number 6 are some arrived letters proclaiming that the writer's genius, other may be blah, blah, blah. So 6, it says appropriate contrast. So contrast to writer's genius to something else. So proclaim writer's genius. And then opposite to that, you can find it from, H, apologies. So the one saying, oh, I'm so good. I'm just like, this writing is the best. And the other one saying, I'm sorry for your time and all. So that's like opposite. Maybe, number 7, move on. We base our decision only on work itself. Annual typesetting will come later. The editors agree. So it says that, based on work itself, and then editors agree that each issue, so that typesetting will come later. I don't see any use of this one, right? Because this is like choppy if you're actually putting this one. That's why I omit this one. And number 8, editor agreed that every issue has to be good and has to reflect good. That's good. So it's F, nothing wrong with this. Anytime you look at the question, your approach should be what's wrong with the given sentence. If anything wrong, then you can change it. If there is nothing wrong, then you have to say no change. But what if, like, it's okay, but then you think that another one also seems okay too, then I'll suggest that you have to go with the no change first because nothing wrong, you cannot change it. Number 9 has to reflect and show the varied diversity. Oh, varied has a meaning of diversity, so you cannot use both of them together. So look at the here, cultural diversity, multicultural, another redundant here. Near is reflect, another redundancy here. So D is the answer, simplest. And then within their policy, that is there with apostrophe RE means they are, and then that is. You have that within they are policy, that doesn't make sense. So after within, you have to have a straight to noun. So then that's why F is wrong. And then because later part, you have to have clause for this one because there is a comma and that means before has to be clause and after has to be clause as well. So then we need to have subject and verb at least. The only option that you can think about subject and verb is J because there is the phrase that you can say. And then there is for this one, this is possessive. If you want to put a THEIR as a there, then you have to put noun after. And then 11, ready to sprint the distance, favoring their choices. Sprint the distance, like you run like really far. All of a sudden, that doesn't make sense. So argue spiritedly for, yeah, so B sounds better because you're like helping the writer that you chose. And then content, spirit of, argumentative, nothing works. And then by November, we have selected enough material to fill 3 issues. So materials that you have, and then found artwork. And then so once is conjunctional adverb. So because of that, you have to have subject and verb right away. And then after that, comma, you have to have subject and verb as well. So editorial product is subject and begins verb. But before I said that too, we don't put comma between subject and verb. So that's why it's simply J, because it doesn't have S at the end. Okay, move on to the next one. We plan the contents of year's issues, page by page. Year's issues. So nothing wrong with this year's issue, the year's issue. So yeah, A. It may snow just after New Year's Day. The first issue is mailed to a typesetters. Snow? All of a sudden you talk about snow? That sounds really weird. Right? Nothing to do with whatever they're talking about. This is the process of sending it out. And then that's why F sounds weird, and then snowy still sounds weird. Shortly thereafter New Year's Day, or just after New Year's Day. I think simply just after will be better for this one. 15, the first mail out and blah, blah, blah. We complete this as soon as the issue title it, and then by the time there are plenty of materials for 3 issues. This one already mentioned in the beginning of this paragraph. It says by November we selected enough material to fill these issues. That's why we'll just take it out. For this type of question, you need to read entire passage. Otherwise, this will be difficult to answer. Anyway, move on to the next passage. Our wolves making a comeback. A dawn hunter crept across the steep, wooded, pine-covered slope. Steep is adjective, and then comma, and wooded, comma. If you want to put like, adjective, comma, adjective, then you have to put and here. But then wooded and pine is same meaning, so you don't need to worry about this wooded because pine covered more specific. So I'll say H is the answer for this one. He was searching for signs of elk when he noticed an unusual track. So signs of elk when he noticed. So sounds good. Nothing wrong with this one. And then broad and human band in the fresher fallen. Fallen is adjective. Fresher is also adjective. Adjective cannot modify another adjective. So what you have to put is adverb. So freshly sounds okay, but fallen, there's no such a thing. Fallen itself is adjective. That's why newly fallen is okay. And then he thought it might have been made. So it's okay. Case of this, might of, could of, should of, anything with the of is wrong, okay? You cannot say might of, could have, should have. Those of is actually meaning of apostrophe, VE, okay? So like could have is like this. Could apostrophe VE, but then sometimes it sounds like could of, but then people get confused, but there's no such thing, okay? And then fresh fallen snow, he thought it might have been made by something. Provide specific transition. What is something? The something should be like, it says transition to the next paragraph, then we have to find that something from the next paragraph. Now, support disappear was unusual. Many reopened the possible wolf kills. Yeah, from the beginning of this passage, that the title itself is wolf. That's why I'll say H is the best option. And even though wolves supposedly disappeared from. So supposedly is adverb, modifying disappeared, which is verb. So adverb modifies verb, that makes sense. And then wolves are the subject. So that's why A is the answer for this one. And then many reports, most of them filled by hunters. So then have recounted. So we have subject here, and then verb have recounted. But then most of them filled by hunters. If you have a comma here, like in beginning of this one, like comma here, then you're supposed to have comma here too. Otherwise, you can have dashes too. So either two commas or dashes. But then, like in the case of J is wrong because having been filled by hunters is a little bit different meaning of given sentence. That's why the answer is G. And then the wolf kills, that is animals killed by wolves. A few people even claim to have stood face to face with the wolves before the animals faded into black timber. And then the 23, which of the following statements, if added here, would best strengthen the assertion that wolves are present in northwest Wyoming? Because the previous sentence, it talks about something that, how the possible wolf kills animals, right? And then like, here also say something about the face-to-face with the wolves before animals faded into black timber. And then United States Forest Service has verified 30 reports of wolf sighting. Then you have to say something about this wolf sighting itself. So if you read many cited, no doubt, gone unreported, that doesn't make sense. D is the best option because they report first. That's why they come and verify. So reported is important idea. And then according to Forest Service officers, the Rocky Mountain gray wolf was common throughout most of Wyoming in the 1860s and 70s. However, the rancher and government wolfers made concerted effort to eliminate the predators yeah, eliminate. They say eliminated by trapping and poisoning them. Okay. All the following sentences are true. Which one, if added here, would offer best transition? So transition between these two that we have to think about. So previously talked about how they eliminate wolves. And then for paragraph 4, it says wolves are now classified as endangered species. So something that, the killing and endangered in between, you have to think about something. To cause some problem with wolf? No, not too many wolves. No, because they kill them and then poison them so that, they're rare first. Oh, no. I meant C, not B. Yeah, they're scarce. So scarce, which means rare, so that, now they're endangered. And then 48 states except Minnesota, after which endangered species, all lower 48 states except Minnesota, after which is the 48 states is the which. And then after the animal began migrating after these states, that doesn't make sense. Migrating from Canada into these. So that's why it's J. Okay. And then move on to the next one. Size of population, blah, blah, blah. Okay, although Forest Service consider citing to be honest report and then confirm presence of wolf packs and breeding pairs. So biologists decided. So after so, in this case, we don't put comma. So biologists decided what? To look. So then we don't put comma here either. So no commas, which is B. Because decided to is one word and one meaning, so we don't pause between. And they're flown to elk and deer wintering area, ridden horses and snowmobiles through the mountain. And so says flown to, and then comma ridden, and like participle that you need instead of thrown, which is thrown, not throwing. Thrown is a participle. There has and called out with low moaning howls in hopes of communicating with wolves, in hopes of, yeah, nothing wrong with this. Let me check others. To hope to communicate, no. In hopes to communicate. Now after hopes you need to have of. So again, like let's say you're between A and C, then you have to go with the A because even like option is nothing wrong. You cannot change it. And then hopes communicate, no. 30, in order to why not ordinary dangers for people to be near wolves, the writer is considering adding the following sentence. So why it is not ordinarily dangerous. contrast point a popular belief. So contrary to popular belief. So you have to think about something with popular belief. So one by one, let's say paragraph 1. So sentence 3, paragraph 1. Here. You thought might be made something. There's nothing to do with you know, the popular belief. And G, 2, paragraph 2 and number 2. Many report, yeah, because many reports has recount howling, tracks, and possible wolf kills. That is the one that they're talking about the kills, but then rarely attack human. That's why it is G. The next one, Suzuki method. In early 1930s, Dr. Suzuki was teaching violin at Imperial Conservatory in Japan. A father, which is there's no conjunction between, so this is comma splice. So we have to put something in between here or something here first. The only option that you can see is the brought in his 4-year-old son for a lesson, although Suzuki had never taught anyone so young, he reluctantly agreed to accept the tiny violin student. At this point, as the writer wants to show Dr. Suzuki and did not feel prepared to teach music at preschool level, given that all of the choices are true, which one best to convey the message. So when I read this, I don't see any problem with this. Still, like, understand, never taught anyone so young. That's like kindergarten or preschool, whatever you call it. So F is fine. And if you check, GHJ, if you want to choose any of these, you have to find anything wrong with the F as well. He pondered what training might work for his preschooler. Suzuki began to think about how young children learn to use language in a very sophisticated way. He suspected that, so it says, began to think about and suspected. Makes sense, nothing wrong with this. Miraculous seeming process may or may not offer. May not offer, just might offer, may offer, might offer, might be good. So G is fine. And also you have to keep the tense as a past, because suspected is tense, past tense. How all learning occurred, including learning to play musical instrument. Immersion was already understood to be a key to child's language development by Suzuki. Immersion was understood by Suzuki. This is what we call it as a passive, right? Passive voice. Passive voices are not always good. Only way that you can use passive voice is you don't know the subject. Okay. So we just make it as active, which means Suzuki already understood. Yeah, so C. And then newborns are immersed in language, baby's first attempt at speech. So attempts is noun, so babies without, it's supposed to have apostrophe J. And this is plural, not one baby, so more, many babies. And 27, teacher provide in-depth language understanding, and children are rewarded for improving. It says children, which is plural, and his or her is singular, then you have to just keep the plural thing. If you want to use his or her, you have to say he or her is a word for. 38, given that all the choices are true, one provide the most effective link between. So this is another transition, right? Sentence 4 and 6. Teacher provides communicate skill based on his realization. Suzuki developed an awareness of how children learn language. His program has since grown into an international acclaimed philosophy of music education. Okay, so the link between F, develop how children learn language. So this is nothing to do with the language itself. Right now, the music, right? So that's why F is wrong. Develop unique approach to violin student. Yes, studies, transfer knowledge, something positive. So G is most relevant in the passage. Writer considering adding the following true statement. Babies begin to coordinate hand and eye movement early in life. So hand and eye coordination. So this is nothing to do with the music. So shouldn't add it here. And then number 40, in Suzuki method, students are immersed in music. Each day, student and the family listens to record. So nothing wrong with this. It's separate, two different independent clauses. And then listen, recorded music, and that at a future date, soon later. So later as future date, so we don't put that. And then learn on an instrument. When the time comes to play the composition, the student already feels intimately familiar with it. Child's early musical accomplishments are greeted with enthusiasm. Lessons provide expert assistance, group sessions and concerts. Group sessions and concerts, which is plural. And then review students with opportunity to share. So provide, which is present tense, we'll see here. So reword present tense and plural. Nothing wrong with this. And the given choices are true. Which one must provide most effective introductory phrase? Introductory is always, something that you have to think about the like topic sentence of all. So for a long time, Suzuki encouraged students to teach alike, strive to like long worldwide. Promotes the idea that child possess potential to develop music. Yeah. So to promote that, what Suzuki is doing is even so more. I guess for many decades, that's like the most straightforward. 44 militant for joys of achievement. Joys of achievement. Or joys of achievement. It says to develop, and then for joy, that doesn't make sense. And then what? That they probably put something to experience. So J, to develop and to experience. All that his teaching inspired and enriched. And who? All of a sudden, you're putting who, and what is a who? We don't see any specific person that you modify who. This doesn't work. Then what you have to think about is maybe only option that you can think about is all. All is possible case of who. Then C is the answer. And the next one. It says the Beltway, the Washington's Expressway. If you visit our nation's capital recently, as I did. So this recently sounds weird because It modifies visit or I did. It's supposed to be I did. So J, and then probably planned trip to several of famous memorial there, and many of which just let me see. The sentence provide a clear example of clear example. Clearest examples of some of the attractions and available in the nation's capital. So the memorials are the one that they're talking about. So C, which many memorials, since by filling the patriotism and pride. Nevertheless, structure I remember most vividly from my trip was expressway called Washington Beltway, which seemed to memorial to frozen and crazy morning. So yeah, sounds okay. Because the opposite, right? And which seemed to memorial to frenzy and crazy lunacy. This is too like redundant. Frenzy is what crazy lunacy is. Same thing. So you're just putting one, which is frenzy. Shuttle resembles an airplane at 10 lanes wide. They are much larger than the bike. They are. What is they then? This expressway is what this is talking about. That's why it is. Beltway is also far more busier. More busier doesn't make sense. You have to take out just like far busier is fine. Wouldn't use this is like that's another redundant too. Virginia and Maryland and intersecting. So it says because it extends through two populous states and extends and intersects. So it has to be H. It's also fast. And thousands of it's also this is a clause, right? Because it is and thousands of Washington who dash from home to work and back sometimes ignore. So ignore is another verb, right? And thousands subject. Then we have subject and verb, this in comma splice. To prevent this comma splice, we have to put something, which is semicolon sounds okay. Period, if you have period, that's good too. But the only option that you can choose here is B. One redeeming feature of Beltway is one redeeming feature. So redeeming is modifies feature itself, which is this is adjective. And that means this redeeming feature is one thing. So one. So no comma that you need to put, just like one straight like a noun phrase. Number 55, at this point, the writer considering adding the following true statement, adding this one. Atlanta, Houston also are surrounded by such a giant highway. This is like straight away from topic. They're nothing to do with how many cities and how many places they have. So C. I already mentioned we don't put those. Okay, I was visit Washington. Mentioned is not good. G sounds okay. The huddle and bustle sounds I went. So it's G. Just introduce because plan to avoid driving because it says that in a suburban Virginia home, I asked them helped more scenic routes. So try to find that the places that you can feel more about this the driveway itself. And the next one, but puzzle I realized they had surrounded to the Beltway long ago, and then graciously I learned to navigate this expressway. But then it says earlier, but by puzzled look, I realized they are so surrendered to this. So it's not like something that you can learn from them. So something negative in a way. So unhappily. So because he didn't learn anything, and I approach it. So learned, past, approach, present doesn't make sense. That's one point. So you have to put approached, especially between G and H. But then, as if we don't put comma between. So H. Therefore, monitoring, was it congested, overcrowded, moving? Congested is overcrowded, so we don't need to put this. Really, watch the weather. Okay, so 60, sentence added here would provide best conclusion paragraph. So like congestion is whatever that we see from the previous one, is the condition and all that stuff. And then F, however, my ability to merge in traffic, improve intensively. Yeah, because they're talking about the traffic. Modern uses for old ways. At first glance, Jane Mount Pleasant garden plots look a total mess. The ground being bumpy and mounds and covered with old leaves. But then, like, there's no proper verb. Ground is bumpy or was bumpy, something that you have to find. But then it says look, which is present tense. That's why you have to keep present tense, C. And then beans hang on corn stalks, squash vines, head sprawled. Again, like present tense we're talking about. Head sprawled is past perfect, doesn't work. So sprawl, G, because this is plural. So G. And then, but this apparent chaos is subject of scientific research. Apparent chaos is subject to, yeah, there's nothing wrong with this because subject and verb, we don't put anything, so this is all wrong. And then Mount Pleasant's gardens are modeled for those grown by Iroquois and other native peoples. Modeled on. So this is on this, right? And then 65, state the logic. Sentence 6 should be. Sentence 6 is talking about the data that gardens are yielding may provide evidence to support use of old method. So using old method has to be modified. So previous sentence is supposed to talk about the old method. So which means previous sentence it says grown by the Iroquois and other native peoples, which is old ways. That's why as is fine. And then Cornell University agronomist and Iroquois herself, Jane Mount Pleasant, questions some of the modern agriculture's practices. And she has a PhD degree. Okay, 66 point wants to add statement that would lead into sentence that follows it. Given that all the choices are true, which one would best accomplish that purpose? So the question says, um, the lead into a sentence that follows it, right? The next one, many farmers and agronomists believe the recent boom. So it says something about how other people believe. So because of that, PhD degree doesn't make sense, and the concern shared by others, yes, G is okay. And then in crop production in last few years, fueled by intensive use of farmland and increased dependency on herbicides and pesticides. Okay, production in few years. Production. So it says recent boom. Many farmers' production last years fueled by, yeah, last few years already, like mentioned recent, so you don't need to put, so which is B. 58. So we have dash all the way to here, the two dashes here, so you just ignore this within the dash part, and then you have to think about the subject is the recent boom. Boom is the subject. Boom in crop production, so that's singular. Okay, singular boom. That's the connected to has. 69. Which of the following sentences added here at this point would both reinforce the conclusion and present the essay to create effective transition to the next paragraph. So next paragraph, Iroquois method begin with the corn being planted for 3-foot intervals. Later, soil has to be around this. So, okay, Iroquois farming technique, whatever offered, yeah, because Iroquois farming technique is this one. 70. Begins, which is, this is present tense we have, then you have to keep the present tense. So, oops. So present tense that you see is only J. Mounded around the young stalk, enhancing the drainage and warming the soil. Not be acceptable. So A, stalks because of enhancing draining and warming. Drainage and warming. No, because this is no cause and effect you can find. Like, the whatever does, why they actually mound around this young stalk is to enhance this. So this is the opposite. So A is the answer. In order to enhance, yeah, that's the thing. Doesn't quite not be acceptable is, yeah, beans are planted on the mound and squash are. So that this is two clauses that we have. But then J is just run-on sentence, nothing. You have to separate this out or putting something in the middle, otherwise it doesn't work. Beans and squash, all of which might be grown in your garden, which provides information that is most relevant, meaningful to this. So these three are C. Iroquois is the main idea that they're talking about here. So, and then move on. Okay, and then perhaps best endorsement to Iroquois 3 stars. Oh yeah, three sisters already mentioned. I mean, that kind of like connects to this question, to previous question too. The system is, so perhaps, yeah, system is that, nothing wrong with this. Suppose the writer choose the brief essay, an example of how past can inform the present. Yeah, the Iroquois farming, like, sort of like giving us idea of how we can do. So, B, there's not really comparing. There actually teaches us how to do. Okay, that's it for this English section. I hope that this video can help you to understand how to do it. Okay, I'll come back with other sections as well. Bye.